Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Well, good evening and welcome to our second districting commission meeting. I'm Tom Greco, the city clerk and kind of the liaison for this group. We do have a busy meeting, but it's primarily going to be exploratory because obviously we don't have the census numbers yet. But Jeff will be talking about that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to note that we do have everyone here. Mr. Timian's on the phone, on Zoom. Everybody else is present in person. So with that, I'll just kind of steer the next couple items here until we get to selection of a chairperson. So the first thing is, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting, February 8th? Or any corrections?
So moved. Approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. I'll have to do a roll call since we have Mr. Timian on the phone. So Hurlbert?
Aye.
Johnson? Aye. Kipley?
Aye.
Millage?
Aye.
Timian?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next item, which is selection of a chairperson. And by charter, it's chosen from among the 5 of you. So what I would do is just first throw it out there. If anybody does have any nominations or if anybody has any interest in it, we could do this by unanimous consent if we only have one, but I'll just open it up to the floor and see if there's any interest or any nominations. That's correct. Mr. Millage was on the last commission.
If it moves you, I'd certainly entertain it. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I would second that.
Excuse me, I think people need to have their mics on when they're talking.
Yeah, if you could, Barb, just hit the button there when the light comes on.
Hit that.
Okay, you want to just say that again for the microphone?
I would nominate Mark Millage, based on his previous experience, to be the director of the commission.
And I will second that nomination.
Okay, so motion by Johnson, second by Kipley to nominate Mark Millage. Is there any discussion or any other nominations?
I guess I'll throw out one piece of discussion, just that, on the same wavelength there. I think we might be on a condensed timeline, and so having someone at the helm it's not their first rodeo, so we appreciate you, Mark.
Okay, very good. So I'll open it up to a vote. Hurlbert?
Yes.
Johnson? Yes. Kipley?
Yes.
Millage?
Yes.
Timian?
Yes.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. Mr. Millage, if you want to grab a seat up at the front, we'll get you situated. Just give us a few moments and we'll let you take the meeting over.
So I get 2 microphones and a gavel. That's a pretty good gig. Thanks. Thank you for that. Next item of business would be new business, which, Tom, would that be you or would that be Jeff with the census
Jeff
update?
will provide information for the next 2 items. So first, the census update.
Thank you. Jeff Schmidt. I'm staff to this districting commission. I work hand in hand with Tom and I'm from the planning office from the last meeting, that if you remember. So we are following the districting criteria, and these are in place in charter. They are the things that we have continued to follow throughout the process when we try to place all the items together to make sure that this is followed correctly. I have an exhibit here that we can see, and this is from the August 2011 option B. Up in the upper right, I think this kind of explains it very easily for a lot of people that will either follow up and look at this. But back in 2010, the population was 153,000 people, and the ideal population was around 30,700 people. So that's what you're trying to get. And then anytime you're above or below that population. You can see down there, there's a negative or a positive percentage above or below that population. Okay? So our first criteria is you're trying to get an equal population and then a cumulative deviation from that standpoint. So again, referring to that label up in the very top, the highest negative was the Southeast District. It fell below the 30,700, okay? And the percentage was 2.3% below, okay? The highest positive was the Southwest, and it was at 31,600, so the positive was at 2.6. You add those two together, and you get 4.99, and what we need to do is stay below 10%. So every time in the future, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, this one's at 7.6. This is at a 3 point. So I'll throw out these numbers, and you'll quickly just relate back to, okay, so is he talking about the number? I'm talking about the percentages, and we're trying to just stay below 10 is what we're trying to do. It could be an 8 and a 1, but we're just trying to stay below 10. So we're trying to make sure that that's that. So that's the biggest thing that we're trying to address, is making sure that there's equal representation. Secondly, we want contiguous
Chairman.
territories.
Jeff, could you just give an update on the actual, like the census numbers before you?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So an update on the census numbers on all of these. We currently do not have the numbers in. We're using the estimate that I have at 195,000. The census numbers will generally come in September. We're hearing that they may come in early in August. All right. The state has been told throughout all 50 states they'll receive the information on August 16th. So Tom and I at this point are feeling comfortable, not confident, but comfortable that on August 16th, the state of South Dakota will get the numbers, and we'll get the numbers at that point. We have reached out to the state as well as our official staff people in the city of Sioux Falls about getting those figures. The real challenge is, and I'll try to keep this simple, is when the federal government releases any federal data, they release it in a spreadsheet and in a software that at this point in June, we don't know what the data is going to come in at, okay? They will release it. Historically, it's been a Tiger file. It's a Unicode, okay? But right now they're saying, well, we'll get you the data in August, and that's what they're stating to us. But since we don't know what it is yet, that's why we're comfortable but not confident. We're like, well, until we really see the data, we don't know if the data is going to be receivable by Tom and I and how quickly we can decipher it and get it out to you. So we believe it will be August 16th, but at the same time, we're still kind of saying September. Questions on kind of the time frame for receiving the information from census? So these maps, again, are based on a lot of stuff is just our population estimates. We want to keep these contiguous territories, which means, you know, we don't want to break them up and have various islands throughout the city of Sioux Falls. No breaks in between. The districts, we have 5 districts, and then you can see there's all these little parcels, which are the precincts. The precincts themselves cannot be divided. They've already been set. We can break precincts at a later date with the counties and with the states. You can separate precincts, but they're set today. So you don't get to come in and say, you know, this one's really large. It's at 5,000. Can we put 2,500 people over here and 25? No, it's at 5,000. It's 5,000. So that becomes a struggle for you when there you go, you know what, this would really help if we could move half of these people into this district and half. You don't get to do that. You move them all, and then what happens, and Mark will help assist with this, you go, well, once you move that 6,000, now this one's really too low and this one gets really too high. That becomes the predicament that you have to deal with, is that it would really be nice if you could take smaller pieces and then you make the numbers work, but it just doesn't fall that way. The puzzle pieces are the way the puzzle pieces are. This one's a little awkward. The charter says the number of districts in both counties should be limited. So it is what it is. That's what the charter says. They want to limit them. Currently, we have 2 districts in the counties, southeast and southwest. So, does that mean that's limited? Does it mean you should only have 1? Should you have less than 5? But when you get down to it, and you as the district and commission make your recommendations, please remember that aspect of it. The length should be short as possible. Again, it doesn't say what that is. Is it a mile? Is it a quarter mile? It just says limit it so you don't stretch it out too far. So this is, again, just background information. We showed you back in early in the spring and again here. So over the last 5, 6 times I've done this, the districts were 24,000, they were 31,000. This time I expect them to be up 38,000. And then why we've done them, because they've been 22% increases or 16% increases. Just kind of background information, what to expect. We would expect them to be relatively large. I sent this out to you again by email, so I put it up as a slide. Nothing really to report here too much, but I did state in the email that I sent out during this last spring that the state number did come in. It came in as at 886,000 people. For background information, that was an 8.9% increase you can see here. And again, as you look at these numbers next or over, when you're trying to fall asleep at night, you can see it's an extremely large increase. So why I said that to you is now, again, when we're sitting there going, I wonder how Sioux Falls numbers are going to come in. My expectation, my assumption is that we're going to come in as a good high number because the state's number came in high. Now, back when we completed the 2017 options, this is what we ended up with. We moved some of the precincts in Southwest and in the Central. We moved some of them in Central and Northeast. We moved Northwest. We moved quite a bit of the different precincts around for these 4 reasons. I think I had 3 options really, and then Mark came back with this option and said, you know what, why don't we try this? He ran the numbers and looked at them, all at the same time remembering those 5 charter requirements, but also trying to keep the numbers to the fewest changes as possible. We wanted to retain natural boundaries. We kept the Central to the highest number, and we wanted to keep the Northeast remaining low. I'm going to mention at the same time right now for all of the district and commission members, at the start of the meeting or right before the start of the meeting, Mr. Timian asked if he could get the spreadsheet of all the precinct numbers. So I will send that out to each and every one of you. This really helped last time for you guys to see that. I will mention on that email when I send it out to you, please remember these are the population estimates. Okay, this is not the finals, but the ratios are generally the same. That's why I'm using it. It will give you an idea. So you'll get the spreadsheet. You'll see I have them color coded. I'll have the 5 districts. I'll have them set with their numbering and all the precincts within each one of the existing districts. And then what you can do with the spreadsheet is you can go, well, I want to take this precinct out and this one gets added, and then you can move the numbers and you can see what happens to your ratios trying to stay around that 39,000 number. And I'll put all those numbers together for you so you don't have to remember them all, but you know. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Timian.
Okay, I got a question. When you're doing that spreadsheet, if you could include the precinct populations for the last 2 redistrictings would be helpful, so we can look at trend lines by precincts. And I guess I'm looking at this. To me, it would make sense that an area that we're projecting for growth for the next 5 years may have a smaller population today knowing that in 5 years it's going to be larger versus having it start large and then grow even larger over that time. I guess why I'm asking for the information.
Okay. I slid ahead to a couple of slides. That's one of the slides that you have in this packet also. Again, I understand when I say these things, they get a little complicated, but this is the growth potential for the city of Sioux Falls. It's the 2040 plan you can see up in the top area, okay? It's color coded. So when you look at the legend, you can see tier 1 is blue, tier 2 is green, and then orange, and there's a time frame behind there. So the blue is going to grow first, then the green, then orange, and what time frame those areas will grow. Now, when you look at the map, you can see Central has no growth area, okay? Southwest has a little bit over the next 5 years, and then you see Southeast has a lot of area, but it's not for 16 to 20. Okay, so you quickly decipher that. Now, what I've done for you on the left-hand side is I've done some of the math for you. Tier 3 has 17,000 acres of land. That 17,000 acres of land will have 40,000 housing units in it. All right? You can take 40,000 housing units and you can put 3 people per housing unit in how we do our math, which would break down then into, in the future, in 2040, in the Northeast, you're going to have 33,000 more people in the Northeast, 30,000 more in the Southeast, and 21,000 more. So when you get this, you go, okay, well, again, we're in 2021, but in 2040, where's the growth going to be? Not in the Central, not in the Southwest, but where it's going to be. So that's what Bob was kind of leading to. So, and that's kind of, you know, what we moved in previous precincts. What the worksheets start to talk about is what the growth areas are, looking at population estimates. Do you move the Central to the south? Should the Southeast be growing west? Just some ideas. Currently, this is the spreadsheet, or excuse me, this is your worksheet that you'll be working off of. When we give you this worksheet, and I've already kind of done 3 of the examples already for you, in 2021, the population estimates, and it says over there on the left-hand side, estimates are based on the current housing numbers and what the ratios are and what the breakdowns are in each one of the districts and each one of the precincts. Okay, so the population total for the city of Sioux Falls is 195,000. Central has 37,800. Northeast has 37,000. Northwest, I'm reading these 4 to you. In the end, the highest is Southeast, it's 9.5. The lowest is Northeast at negative 5.5. So you have a differential of 15. So right away you go, won't work. You have to be at 10, and we're at 15. So as we sit right now, you can't, Mark wouldn't be able to pound his gavel and say, Commission, you did a great job. The estimates are all in. We'll wait till the census figures come in. Your work is done. It's not. We have to move the numbers around to get these to work. So what I tried to do, option A, all right, I put a little orange arrow. I moved 2-1 into Central. I was like, let's try that. So I moved 2-1 down in the south central part of town. It's currently in the southeast. I moved it up into Central, and you can see how the numbers work. You go, well, look, you end up with a 9.73. It's okay. And that's what all these are. These are estimates today. You'll have to play them out again, the scenarios, when we get the final numbers, but I'm assuming that the ratios are going to be the same. The housing numbers are still the same. The ratios are going to be the same, but we'll see when they come in, and this is what your exercise will get you when you get the spreadsheets and you can go through them.
Jeff, a quick question on that.
Yes, sir.
On the right-hand or the left-hand column, you've got the southeast comparing with the northwest, but shouldn't that be compared to the other extreme would be the northeast, correct? Not the northwest? In terms of the population disparity?
No, because I didn't change the legend in the map. If I'm hearing you right. The southeast and the northwest, the percentages that I have at 9.73, I didn't change the map itself.
Okay. I was just looking at the population estimates.
Okay? And the northeast and the southeast?
Those are, I mean, northeast on the population estimates, northeast is the lowest and
Correct.
southeast is the highest, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So with this shift,
Northeast at 37,000 versus northwest.
I mean, the only two with this particular
So
change.
northeast could still be the lowest number.
Right.
Yes, sir.
That's right. Okay.
Yep. I'll double check that. Because northwest should still be at 39, might not be the lowest number.
Right.
If I could, to me, it would be helpful on that one if you go with the original population and the revised, so we can see how the changes work.
The original.
Like, as I'm looking at these,
So a side by
so when you
side,
move to 39, yeah, so if you're moving into northwest, that, when you move 2-1 into central, okay, so that would show the change in the central population and the change in the southeast.
Yes.
So you can see the delta on those.
Yes. Yep.
Because
And I
right
have.
now, as you look at all of those, the graphs that are there are all the same. Aren't they?
Yes.
Yes. And it'd be nice to see the new numbers up there.
Correct. Yeah, and I have all those. I just, as the PowerPoint, the slides today, I just tried to simplify them. So I can get you all those and give you all the numbers revisited. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate you keeping it simple for people like me.
Well, just a presentation versus the background data, and I'll email it out, all the working stuff, information. Again, based on Mark's comment also. So option B, you can move 2-3 from the central, from southeast, excuse me, okay, to the northeast. You move those 2,500 people and the ratios worked. So I tried that one. So, you know, in all these summaries, what I'm showing you is you don't end up going, you know what we need to do is move 42 different precincts. You end up going, I'm going to move this one and I move this one, and you go, all right. And then you bring them back down and you try another option. It's very minute. And the whole aspect, I can't remember exactly the verbiage that Tom used at the beginning, this example, these exhibits, you know, we're just trying to, at this point, show you that when the numbers come in, you can just look at them from the census. You'll be able to see them. We'll give you the spreadsheets with all the precincts. We'll give you a couple options. And that's what Mark did last time, as well as all of you. You can go, what I want to do is try to do this number up and down. You'll be able to bring in an option, and we'll be that much further ahead. So I think you'll probably have 3 options when the numbers really come in, you know, maybe 4. There won't be many. And it all goes back to, again, the numbers are all going to be there. You'll be around that 38,000 people. Did you keep them all contiguous? Did you keep 2 counties together? Did you not split the precincts? Did you keep them not elongated? Some of those other ones are pretty easy to do, but you got to kind of move something from the southeast into the central. You know, I'm going to kind of come back to this last one and say, you know, what's your thoughts? If you have any, then Tom can go back to the timeframes.
I think Bob made a good point earlier too, that one of the things we have to consider is not just where are we now, but where are we going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. And I think if you go back to, it was the option F, that what we did in 2017, you'll see that we actually made the southeast artificially lower, if you will, anticipating there was going to be population growth. And we inflated the number in the central because we didn't anticipate that there'd be the same level of growth that you have in the other districts. And I think when you look at the numbers where they're at now, central didn't move much. Northeast didn't really move much either. It was the southeast that did the
Correct.
bulk. And I think as you look at what you've got here, certainly the southeast is going to continue to grow. The growth is going to be in the outer parts, really all four corners, but primarily it's been southeast, and it looks like the northwest is really taking off right now too.
It's not taking off right now. You won't see the numbers big in the Northwest now, but in 2025 and 2030, that's where the push is going to be. But you're absolutely right. You kind of go, what gets us through today? And if you're looking at, okay, now I got two options that are really good, what's going to help that next districting commission?
So I'd ask a question based on that, and then I'll shut up. One, would it be possible, if you look at what you did on option A and option B, option A makes sense if you're just going to make a shift right now, because that's probably a natural, geographically for a central district. But then you started on option B, you started to look over in that area. The one thing we want to avoid is changing a district today and then changing it back again in 3 years. You want to try to minimize that process. But if you're looking at where the southeast is going to go in the future and that longer time frame you had going out 15, 20 years, we might even take a look at doing A and B if it works with the math, because right now it looks like the central and the northeast are the two that are lagging, and southeast certainly is going to make that up and then some in the coming years.
Excellent.
And that's kind of the question I have for either Jeff or Mark can give his history on it too. But we know our successors will have another redistricting after the census in 2030, but there can be an intervening. What happened? What was the triggering event that we had this process in 2017 off of the census years?
Sure. Good question. Excellent question. So every 10-year census we do it, and then anytime there's a 15% increase between censuses. So that's why, again, you saw one in 2008, there was a 22% increase. In 2017, we got over 15%. So we had one in 2017. So before 2030, I almost guarantee you there's going to be another 15% increase, and we're going to need another one.
And what's the official, is that just the housing estimate? Do we deem it as a city that we've grown 15%, or is there something from the federal government like the census?
It's both, but it's our population from our housing estimates. The census comes out with an estimate every July, but it's 18 months behind schedule. So, and I do the estimate every January. And so we just keep track with the city clerks and say, so it'll be January 1st of 2022, I'll give a new population estimate and a new one. And census goes, well, as long as you're using accurate basis and it's been consistent, we can come into the districting commission and give you the facts and figures and move forward with it.
But so on the slide that has the 2040 plan, is it fair to say that the tier 1 and tier 2, that would lead to a 15% increase, that it's fair to say before the next census, we will hit that 15% mark, and we can take some of this growth into account and possibly shift some of the districts in anticipation of that?
Yes, not necessarily in 5 years, but it will be again in that tier 2 time frame, somewhere in that 6, 7 time frame. I say, well, we have a 5-year, 10-year, and a 30-year history that I look at, and we grow by about 4,000 people a year. So, and that's been pretty consistent. So if you go, well, over 7 years, we're going to have another 30,000 people, you just can back into that.
Thank you.
But our guidance is that it has to be under the 10% now, and we can use that growth as to which district would be might be light or heavy on population today, so that it kind of works out better. But but we can't be looking at this and making decisions based on what we project the population to be in 7 years. It has to be based on the population today, but we can use our deviations to accommodate growth.
Correct. You have to use
Correct.
and we won't even really use the estimates today because we're just going to sit and wait for the census figures to come in. But then once the census figures come in, when you make your recommendation and your plan, you'll make your recommendation and plan based upon this option works the best based upon future growth and expectations.
Thank you.
Say, Chairman, may I voice an opinion here or questions? Jeff, I was kind of thinking about this a little bit as well, and I appreciate all your information here. But why do we have districts, right? Well, it's issues and problems specific to one part of town, and that way those people can be represented, right? Otherwise, we'd have all at large. But then, of course, the problem would be you might have 5 neighbors from the southeast representing the whole city. So we have districts. And districts, typically are represented by maybe their commonality, right? So I guess one of my questions is, this is only a question, I'm not trying to tip the apple cart here, but there are, for instance, in the central district in particular, I think has the most uniqueness relative to any. For example, I think really you could say the southeast, northeast, northwest, southwest, we have them kind of geographically in that place, but that's arbitrary. They could be A, B, C, or D, really, in terms of crossing 26th Street or not crossing 26th Street. There's not really any differences in my mind for the most part, and I'd certainly be willing to be corrected. My point here is there's a couple of districts, I would say 4.1 and 414, 4.1 and 414 in particular. You take Barb, or where I work in the Rock Island Plow Building, it's on 7th and Phillips, and it's not in the central district. Those people deal with the same planning, the same zoning issues, the same public services, bid issues, crime issues, zoning issues, all of these mixed use issues. And Barb is in the Jones Drug Building, or the Jones Building. She's not in the central district. So to me, I just wonder if there isn't a chance, to the point you're saying, we don't want to change these a whole bunch. But why, and even across the street in where Sioux Steel is going, or where Rail Yard Flats and Sharapa 2 are, those folks would be dealing with issues in even the Whittier neighborhood, which would be core neighborhoods. And to me, downtown and the core neighborhoods should have be represented and have a voice in their district. And so I'm just wondering, is that something that has been looked at or could be corrected a little bit, or is that something to stay away from?
Both. It's been looked at, and it's not something to stay away from. It's been a challenge every time, and I don't think I put the numbers in here specifically, but here, yeah, I did. So each time we've moved a lot of these precincts, and you can see in the map to the right, we've moved, my eyes aren't that good, but we've moved those precincts to the north and central multiple times. So the problem continues to be, they're the ones on the fringe. Every time they're abutting a district, they become the pieces that end up having to flow, and the numbers work. So you sit there and you go, well, I don't want to move. And it's even on the west side. I'm looking at the ones on the west side closer. They're like, this one really should be in the central. I know, but the only way this is going to work is if these numbers fall over to your, it's just the central is the piece that keeps the whole chess space together. It's really tough. Every time we come in, we're like, we're going to have a public meeting on this, and we end up talking about the central district because it's the hardest one to deal with. It's really challenging. So that's why I'm saying it's both. Please look at it from a new, fresh eye with how do you do this? And if we go, you know what, I have a great idea. Can we start over and move everything into the central, see if the numbers work? And we go, that's a great idea. But it just ends up that the pieces start flowing outside of central to get the numbers to work for all of them.
You make a valid point, though, Tom, and I'll just add that when we did this 4 years ago, what you see on the north end of Phillips Avenue really didn't exist 4 years ago. You didn't have the Jones 421, you didn't have the Cascade, you didn't have the number of people living north of, is it 6th Street or 8th Street where that cutoff is, but you're dealing with those precincts. That's the challenge.
Yeah, they're large parcels of ground. And I know I'm getting off tracked and on my soapbox here a little bit because I sent this email out to you too. This is where you're really going to start to understand, why does the census matter? Why do we fill those things out? Where, again, I've done this for 30 years and I've said, fill out your census, it's critical. And I sent out that email to you that said, New York lost a delegate by 30 people and Minnesota gained a delegate by 30 people. So to Mark's point and your point, so we have a bunch of housing on the north end and central. Did they fill out their census? So that we had really low locations where people didn't fill them out, and you go, it's critical that the people fill out the census. If they didn't fill out the census, when we get these numbers back, it's going to be telling for certain locations that go, well, that's not right. I know that's not right. And I'm going to go, that's the data we have. The people that filled out the census, the numbers are high, and the people that didn't fill out the census, the numbers are low. So how do you get that information out during the time when you need to fill out the census is critical. It comes back to this, it's a little too late, but next time you'll go, remember, people, fill out your census because it's important on districting and precincts and funding, and yeah. I hope we don't lose some because 30 people didn't fill out theirs in the northeast part of town or the north central. Other thoughts, comments? We haven't talked a lot about Southwest, Northwest, but again, they're large tracts. There's some really, I'm squinting here, but 4,000, 4,600, 5,500 people, and you go, some of them you can't move, as well as a lot of them are on the periphery, so you can't move the numbers anyways. They just can't fall within, you can't slide them right into another district. So that's a challenge, and that gets back to the charter where they have to be contiguous and you can't make them elongated. So when you go, well, how do you do this? They have to be, as I show on option A, it has to be kind of contiguous and touching. So you drop that one in. Could it go over to the southwest? Well, probably not. You look at this one. Well, obviously it can't go to the northwest. There's just some that don't make any sense where they can go. Here, you could move maybe something from the northwest into the northeast, but it's the airport, which we just haven't done those up there because they're so large, it sways the whole character. So after a while, you just go, well, none of those make any sense.
What do you mean?
It's a really fun exercise. When you get down to the workshops, I think that's what Mark found out.
But what do you mean it sways the whole? Because to me, like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, the northeast and northwest geographically doesn't mean anything to me. The airport is a big piece, and there's probably not much housing there. But I guess I'm just wondering, like, why wouldn't you do that? Or explain to me a little more. You say that's
twofold. The geographic representation is one thing, and then the population numbers to make sure that the numbers work. So it sways things along. There's just some that just don't work because the numbers don't work. If, when you get up there, if there were like 1,000 in some of those large, you'd be like, well, that 1,000, you can bounce around. But they're 2,500 and 3,000, and you're like, they just can't physically change. And you're like, yeah, but they could maybe geographically. And you're like, yeah, they could. And maybe they wouldn't look too awkward, but the numbers just don't work. Or do they? And then you're like, well, okay, I'll move this one. Then you go, okay, well, now the dominoes start to fall. You go, well, I got that one, then I got to move this one, and then this one starts to move, and then they all just start falling, and you're like, okay, now I really made a mess out of it. But maybe you didn't make a mess. Then you go, that was the perfect example. And then the room fills up with everybody in Sioux Falls coming and go, you moved everything. And I'm like, the districting commission. So it's fun.
Jeff, on this map, there are 3 little white boxes. Are those areas that have recently been annexed, or are those?
Yes. Were you able to read that?
Well, I can distinguish the gray from the white from the colors, and
Very good. Yes. So there are in the northeast, way up by I-90, on the west by McGovern Middle School, and then the southwest, there's 3 white areas that are recently annexed, okay? But what we labeled on this legend is, but they haven't yet been assigned to a specific district or precinct yet. When we go through this process, Tom and myself, the clerk's office and planning office, we have to legally describe each of them to put in ordinance, then go through a public hearing process to make sure that the geographic boundaries describe these things. And if they haven't been done well enough to geographically describe them, then we can't just say, well, yeah, that's in, we're going to throw it in there. You have to redo the ordinance. So we haven't done those 3 areas yet. And again, at this point, the one in the northeast, just to help everybody, the one in the northeast, that's the safety training facility. That's where the fire academy is going to be. The one by McGovern will be a really large housing subdivision. That's 160 acres, but it's graded now. There's nothing there. And the one in the southwest is just south of 41st Street. And there's nothing there yet, but there will be significant housing. But nothing today.
In the gray areas on the map, are those areas the city has gone around but have not been incorporated into the city.
There are parcels within the city that have not been incorporated. Those are unannexed, like Split Rock on the east side, correct. So those are numbers. Those are numbers that don't get represented in city limits. They're in Minnehaha County or in Lincoln County, but they're not represented in the census numbers or my population estimates.
Because it looks like McCrossin Boys Ranch is not in the city either.
Correct, yes, McCrossin's, yep. Any of those, any land that has not been annexed into the city of Sioux Falls is therefore not within city limits are counted as city limits property.
Thank you.
Yep.
any further questions for Jeff? So what are next steps for us?
Well, if I could move on to the next item.
Yes.
Okay, and Jeff, could you put us on that slide, the timeline? Okay, so Jeff provided an overview of kind of where we are with the census, and the key thing that he mentioned is we kind of have to wait to see what we receive on the 16th. If it does indeed come out on the 16th, it's generally accepted that the states will get their information. Whether we can use it is a different story. Regardless, what you have before you is the bare bones timeline of what you would need to achieve by the end of the year. And I'll start basically at the bottom of the slide, which is really just the latest date for the council of disapproval plan. So earlier this year, the council passed an ordinance to adjust the timeline. That's allowed by charter. But for all intents and purposes, this entire process, absent some sort of judicial intervention, which is possible in a charter, we don't anticipate it. It would be wrapped up on December 28th with the plan being not disapproved by the council. I know that's confusing lingo, but they don't necessarily approve it. They just have the option to disapprove it. So really the key date, the target is December 7th. That's a council meeting date where we would anticipate the latest date that the plan would be submitted to the council. The way that worked last time is it was put on the agenda and literally presented to them. There were a few questions, and that was kind of it. But the other two key dates there, so that's one thing that was changed in ordinance. We changed it from not less than 9 months to not less than 4 months. The item before that is the latest date to hold a public hearing. That will generally be one of your last steps before submitting the plan to the city council. You have to hold at least one, and typically it's been 1 or 2 just to kind of reach the widest audience. That too has been changed. Before you couldn't submit the plan until 30 days had elapsed from the public hearing. That has changed to 10. There's not a huge reason for it to be 30 days, other than just the time to put the final report together, get signatures, and agree on it. So as early as 10 days after, it could be submitted to the council. So that puts us at November 24th. But really, that October 25th date is the date that you would have to notice, based on those dates, the date that you'd have to notice a public hearing. So really what the commission would want to look at is having a plan finalized by the third week of October or so, so that it can get noticed, have the public hearing at the end of November, and then presumably submit a plan to the council in December. So what that means is still going back to essentially 2 timelines. And Mr. Chair, if it's all right, I just may bleed over into the next agenda item too, for you all to discuss. What I would recommend is that we still continue, at least for now, to assume that we will not receive the final data until September 30th, until we get a little more fidelity on what those numbers look like. So to that end, what I would do is send out a meeting invite for within the first 10 days of October, and try and get something on the calendar, unless you all want different direction, get something on the calendar for early October, assuming a late September delivery of the census numbers we need. But I will also send out a save the date meeting invite for the end of August, early September, in the off event that we do get, that we are able to use the census data that's delivered on August 16th. So what I would do and recommend, Mr. Chair, is I'll send out a doodle poll for 2 separate meetings. One would be a save the date in the event we get the August 16th figures. Figures that we could use, and then the other one would be if they don't come till September 30th. This way, y'all have clear calendars for a meeting, and you could get to work on it.
Sounds like a plan. Anybody have any concerns with that or support that? I think it makes sense.
Mr. Timian.
Mr. Timian?
Okay, I have I guess that item that Mr. Verbo brought up about the nature of the districts. I think that would be an item that would be worthy of discussion and consideration, even without final population numbers. For instance, I guess as I'm looking at this, and I think of Sioux Falls, that as you look at north of 18th Street or 16th Street, it gets to be central and it goes north. If you looked at a 16th to Russell, and if it is Cliff to something else, but if you could look at some items there, could we, to me, it would be nice to have some time to consider that. That is to me, I guess that's an item that makes a lot of sense, that what is there for commonality of issues, that as we look at most of the area on the fringe, the biggest thing is going to be what is going to be there for services on commercial. That is going to be there may be those people who object to a retailer at an intersection or something like that. But as we look at that central part of Sioux Falls, as it is being redeveloped and the items that are there, I think it's important that the person representing Central Sioux Falls has those interests and those items that are there that are unique to them. And as we water that down and chop it up, to me, it's an item that is worthy of discussion, and to have a meeting prior to getting the final data to look at that and consider something like that. Otherwise, we're going to be in a situation where once we have the data, we're going to need to make decisions on a fairly quick timeline. And I think if we look at this, that is the process that normally goes, why not take this pause and give consideration to something like that to see if it could work? And it could be that it's not a workable item, but at least it's worth consideration. So I would like to meet, to me, if we could meet even in in early or mid-August, something like that. And looking at that one, just seeing, okay, is there a way that we can play around with some numbers that works, that boundaries make sense, not just by population, but by concerns or issues or anything like that?
So a question for Jeff here I would have is this something we could, I mean, you obviously understand the domino effect of the precincts involved if we're looking at, you know, what Bob is talking about here. Is this something that if you were able, your staff, or would you want our input into putting together a proposal or two, and along the lines of what Tom had mentioned earlier too, with regard to the central district, if we were to look at, say, precincts 4 and 14, 4-1, 4-14, just as an example, we know what effect that would have on the northeast district, which could potentially have an effect on the southeast district, but you've been through this exercise before.
Yes, I can do it. Yes, it's not that difficult. I mean, for example, right away, what I'm looking at is Central right now has 37,800. So you can add 1,000 people to the Central. Okay, so you're like, okay, that part, you'd like to add 414 right here. If you added that's 1,500. So now you can maybe add 414, but you can't add 41 right here because that's 3,000. Unless you go, well, we don't want these over here. So if you added both of these, you go, well, we're going to take out, I mean, you can only add 1,000 to 1,200. So you can add one, but not the second one. If you add both of them, you got to go, well, we're going to take off everything on the west side.
Or how about 511?
You take off right here. You take off 511 out of Central, and you could add 41, and that's the dominoes. You go, and that's not something that I do. I go, you're representing Central, and you're going to say that they're not Central, but they're Central.
Well, and maybe it is arbitrary, but what I might offer is that I would start with the downtown, and we'd have to define what
Right.
that is, and the core neighborhoods, which I would include is Cathedral,
Yep.
you know, Whittier west of Cliff, and, you know, All Saints and McKinnon and Pettigrew, and I would say they should be a
Yep.
part of the central district.
Yeah.
And then we have to make decisions as you get away from that. But if I were, you know, going to offer my opinion, that's what I would say. That should always be, or at least for the foreseeable future, that should be the central district.
And that's why I go back to Mark and Bob's. It's easy to do because you can go, that's option C, D, E, and you bring them in and you look at them. And even during the public discussion, you go, here's the ones you have, because you can do them. I mean, I do them all the time, and yeah, it's good exercise, and you figure out which ones you like the best. But I don't like be the one going, Jeff decided that was the one that should be central. Yeah.
No, and I'm saying, let us shoulder that.
Yeah, right.
And I think if we could meet again,
Correct.
we could
I would have all those laid
develop
out.
some ideas, come back to you, and as a group, discuss those if it makes sense to accomplish that objective. That is why I would say I think we should be meeting before we expect to get final data.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll set that up, probably for mid-type August.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that we don't have to have the actual census numbers. We can go off the data you have now and pretty much see how it works. And then once we do have the census numbers, we can fine tune whatever it is that, you know, what direction we're leaning. You know, I'll just say one further thing, and to the point of the domino effect. You know, when you look at that map, there are certain neighborhoods that make sense as part of the southeast, the northeast, the central. Completely understand what Tom and Bob are talking about, and I think this would be a good exercise, not only for now, but for future planning too. I mean, maybe once and for all, we could stop some of the shift of some of these precincts, and just settle on, here's where we're at.
And I can't remember, Mark, if it was with your districting or if it was one before. I mean, they said, let's do stripes. Was that you?
No, it was not
Okay,
ours.
that was the one before. They're like, let's try, and we went banding, and we did spoke and hub, and we did pizza, and because it's the time to try it. Let's try all these different things, and then in the end, you come back and you go, a little bit different, let's try this one, and we end up with a really good idea. But you try a lot of different things and you look at it and you go, okay, that was a really bad idea. But we tried, circles and, yeah. You try them.
The downtown is a central part of your city. That's considered the hub of your city. The challenge is when you look at where that direction of growth and how that is shifting further and further southeast and will over the next 2 or 3 decades, and still trying to maintain the way this is set up is, kind of, you've got the central, but it's not a perfect circle. Certainly the precincts have a lot to do with that. When you look at the size of some of these precincts, some are below 1,000 people, and you've got the one in the southeast, it's over 7,000 people. I mean, there's not a lot you can do with some of those. Anyone else? So the plan then is to send a meeting invite?
Yes, I'll send one for mid-August, and I'll still send one for early October, just so you have that date carved out too. But the folk will certainly have a meeting in August, and it'll be basically on identifying the identities of the geographic areas of the city. And just a note, I'll send out a press release for the next meeting too, just to try and get a few more folks here.
Okay.
Question on that then, just for clarification. It sounds like the August meeting is maybe a qualitative discussion, maybe that almost throw the numbers out and just discuss our neighborhoods that we each live in. That's why we were chosen from each district, and it's maybe a qualitative discussion. And I'm fine with that, but I didn't want to lose, I thought at one point we talked about meeting, if we do have the data and it's mid-September, I would think we'd maybe want to still say, maybe it's just merely a save the date, like you said originally, because if we get that data in August 16th and Jeff's crew crunches it, we might want that time with the data and have the quantitative discussions and start throwing some things around. I wouldn't want to wait all the way till October and then we're really under the gun. So not to maybe add 3 meetings to our calendars, maybe 1 or more of them will prove to be unnecessary, but I just don't want to lose potential momentum, and in mid-September might be our sweet spot where we can get this done.
So maybe that next meeting we're talking about, we look at the first half of August, and then you'll have those dates in the latter part of August, and then early part of October.
There'll be 3 invites, so look for 3 polls over the next week or so.
Okay.
That's a good idea, and we'll get them all lined up.
Okay.
Good input, thank you. Anyone else? I'd go to public comment here, but we don't have any public comment to be had. I would encourage people who are watching at home, if there are any watching now or any watching at 2 in the morning when this is rebroadcast, feel free to watch for the next meeting and make sure your voice is heard. This is important. This is all part of the political process, the electoral process, if you will, where you vote and how you vote, and your input is important into this discussion, especially what we're going to talk about next as we look at how some of these district boundaries are drawn. So leave it at that.
And I think,
Yes, go ahead.
yeah, and I think the item is who is representing them, that it has the issues that they're concerned with. But it's amazing. We have an amazing city when I see the growth as to what is there and everything else. It's a great future, and our obligation now is what can we do on the redistricting that it's just fair and makes the most sense.
Yeah, I would encourage, as we, Jeff and his team will work on some of these options for us, but I would encourage each of us on our own to take a look at these maps, these resources we've been given tonight, and noodle with those a little bit. You can kind of see as you move one precinct here, how that affects the next one, but that's the last process. I think Jeff came to us with 5 or 6 options, and we ended up using that resource to put together a seventh option.
Yep.
And I think, we come to this meeting, don't wait until the next meeting to come with ideas, but start to put those together and see what we can individually come up with and then collectively as well.
And I just wanted to mention, I went back and looked at this option A, and I did have that incorrectly typed or whatever. That's the northeast is the negative 5.52. I just typed it northwest, so. And I'll correct that on the slide as well as make my note.
Very good, thank you. Anyone have anything else for the good of the cause? In that case, I want to thank you all for your time and your interest in this. This is important stuff. It may not look real sexy on the outside, but it's something that's very vital to what we do. So with that, I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
We don't have to take a vote, do we? Just
We'll do a quick.
quick roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Hurlbert,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kipley,
Yes.
Millage,
Yes.
Timian.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
I'll try to be in person next time.
That would be great. We look forward to seeing you. And we'll wait to hear from Tom on those meeting options and get those turned around when you get those invites. We'll get the votes in and get these booked so we're all here. With that, meeting adjourned.
Thanks.